Okay, this is live. Is anyone hearing? Is it working? I don't think it is. Why? How's that? There we go. Now we have sound. About time. Now we just got to get Essence into this conversation, and it's not working. Down to 2 viewers, 3 viewers. Woohoo! Q&A. Where is Essence of Thought? Okay, how does this work here, folks? No one will listen to you. Okay. There's one. Maybe that worked. Just me in the corner. At least I have audio, it looks like. It's always a nice thing to have 2 parts of a video, both audio and video. Didn't want to do sign language again. Can't do sign language under pressure. But it looks like Essence of Thought is not a live hangout with Essence of Thought. Where is he? I did invite him. So we're just waiting for him to show up. I'm not going to disconnect this show, because if I do, I'll probably never figure out how to get it back. So I'm just checking to see if he's sending me a message. Maybe, maybe not. Now I'm kind of lost in my computer. Where does it go? There's he is.
It works.
Amazing. Well, it is a long way to go, you know. We got to get all the pipes lined up correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got to get the cats running the right way, and
oh yeah, man.
Spiders turning their little wheels. And
I always wondered how that worked.
Yes. How are you today?
Very good. Very good. So, enjoying your classes?
I haven't started yet. I start actually in October, so it's a very late start.
Oh, good.
I've just moved back into accommodation because I'm helping out different societies get ready for the new freshers coming. So, you know,
new freshers.
We call them freshers, yeah. You know, we've got the Atheist Human Secular Societies having both the president of the British Human Society Association come in to do a talk on, you know, living a well-meaning life in a deterministic world. It's Written in the Stars by Jim Al-Khalili. And then we have another talker coming in who's going to be talking about, you know, creationism and religious education, etc. So we're planning that, and we're also doing little things here and there, getting different ideas, trying to get several societies working together the humanities, so the LGBT society, mind, SOC, which is, access, mental disabilities, etc., along with Go Green, which is just a general environmental society, just trying to get us all working together so we can all help each other. So it kind of feeds into what we want to discuss today as well.
Well, it is, what I tend to like to do is I like to find things that people aren't particularly comfortable with, using reason for. It's easy for subjects like religion. I often will see some of these things like someone's conversation with just, what did you call it? I often forget what you call it, but it's when people just simply use from authority. The last video, one of the last videos you did, in terms of looking at everything was from authority. So-and-so said so, so-and-so. It's like, who cares what they said? It's like, what does it mean? How does it work in reality? So I like to find things that people are forced to think about. Like, for example, nuclear, from an environmental perspective, has had a very negative background, but you can look at it and say, well, maybe it's a good solution given that it doesn't give out a lot of greenhouse gases. So as an example, how would you respond to something like that?
Oh, the nuclear one, or
yeah, the nuclear one as an example.
Nuclear has its benefits and it has its costs.
Right, sure.
Talking about things that the waste is going to be disposed properly in a specific area in a specific way, then yes, but of course we haven't had the best history in the West. We've been giving it away to third world countries to kind of get rid of some of their debt, or it turns out like they weld them in concrete, and that concrete's already started to erode, sort of thing.
Right.
So, we haven't had the best containment yet. I don't know how the Japanese do. I mean, of course, there was a big issue with that then recently. So.
Well, see, that's a good example where if information changes. Like if I were to tell you that the thorium reactors are designed to have basically no nuclear waste, would you have? I mean, that's a good. Yeah, waste is a problem. If we can get rid of the waste, then we're not dealing with very big of a problem.
You've got, of course, we need other resources. For example, we do a lot of mining, etc. So sometimes they'll turn old mines and quarries into sort of storage facilities. That then it's not brilliant, it's not perfect, but if there was going to be a horrendous scar in the land anyway,
right,
then turning it into a facility isn't such a bad idea. Rather than doing a facility in the middle of some other nice place, because then you destroy two nice places.
Right, exactly. Using the resources we've already spent on that. But that's sort of a good example of where information should change our minds. I mean, whereas if you don't have the information, if you didn't know, for example, that there was a clean version of nuclear, if we just look at one, then we won't be able to reason about another. And that's kind of...
It points out the fact that there's nothing black and white. For example, old sense of morality, you look at the biblical sense, the Quranic sense, there's good and then there's evil. It's all black and white. Look at all old fiction, it's all very black and white. There's a clear hero and then there was a clear villain sort of thing. In modern times, you can see this particularly in popular culture with TV series, etc. You have more of a grey scale. You have the people that you're supposed to love, they're the main characters, but sometimes they'll steal or they'll hurt someone, etc. Or, for example, you have the anti-heroes as well. People who have great visions and they want great ends, but they have, what we see as a bad way of going about getting it or obtaining it. Our society is starting to shift away from black and white, and I think that's also one reason we get such a rise in fundamentalism. They're becoming scared because not everything's set out as it once was.
Well, and I'm thinking that the problem with that sort of reasoning is they're not reasoning really. They're just going back because because this is the answer to this question. If I'm asked this question, this is the answer. There's no other answer. This has to be the right answer. Because it's written down here. It says right answer is A, and that's the answer they give you, and they just find some way to get back to A, without saying there might be another way. There might be someone else's different opinions, and also the lack of evidence. It's like, well, how do we know what you're saying is true? Well, because this authority says so? I mean, just asking yourself that, how do you know something is true? What is it that you believe? Because I'll often believe something. I say, well, do I know that to be true? Like the classic example of the lemmings. Are you familiar with the lemming story? How they used to, I don't know if they say it anymore. They say, well, they're acting like lemmings. Have you ever heard that saying?
Yeah, yes, I have heard that saying. Mm-hmm.
And do you know where that comes from?
Yes, the idea that lemmings used to kill themselves, which, yeah, doesn't happen.
It's always a lack of information. It wasn't that I understood the story and the intent of the story correctly, but I didn't actually know that it didn't actually happen and that it was a fraud. You know, it was a very interesting phenomenon. If it really did occur, why would lemmings kill themselves? That's a weird...
There are similar things in nature. For example, shrews, there are certain types of shrews when mating season comes, because the males go on absolute rampage, you know, all the males end up dying.
Oh, really?
Because they become so hyperactive, and they will have one after the other partner, and they will not stop, and eventually their immune system deteriorates, their fur starts dropping out, and then they die. But the fact is, it's beneficial to the species, because then the females with the offspring, suddenly the food is opened up again. Half the population has dropped out.
Wow.
So maybe we should say you're acting like shrews.
Well, see, there's a good example. I mean, if you can show there's a beneficent to it, when we have to, and that's the beauty of natural selection and of evolution, is we have this model, and we say, well, if we can find an example of that model that doesn't work, that's interesting, right? That's, oh, wow, that's, you might change my mind about the understanding of, like, the lemming example. You came up with a shrew example. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
You know, yeah, there are many grey zones that we like getting into. Sexual morality is another one, especially when it comes, for example, to people who are sadists, or was it masochists? You know, masochists, that's the one. People who gain sexual pleasure from pain. You know, a bit of pain I can understand. But, you know, for me, when it starts becoming an issue is, for example, when they start ending up hospitalized, because then that starts costing the hospital system, the taxpayer. You know, that's when it becomes an issue.
That's an interesting thing that, like, I argue with libertarians about freedom and stuff. And I would like to see a system where you could, like, buy into, like, you could buy special insurance, you know, like masochistic insurance. Are you a masochist? Okay, it's going to cost you a little bit more per month. I mean, there we're compromising. We're finding solutions to a specific need or desire, whatever. I mean, there are alternative solutions. We don't have to say, no, you can't do that. We could say, well, these are the costs. It's like people that jump off of mountains. I mean, like, okay, if you want to jump off of a mountain with a parachute, that's fine. Make sure
life insurance goes up.
You know, you got to buy the insurance. You got to buy. You know, you have to pay a little more, which I think is. I mean, I would rather look at those solutions instead of saying no. I mean, no is too easy to say that it's not the correct behavior.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what we were saying we were going to discuss, you know, I guess we can bring this round to say whether we should be, as, you know, an atheist community or secular community on YouTube, actively going out and challenging religion in a sense, you know. To what extent is it beneficial? You know, when should we get involved? When should we not get involved? Sort of thing. Because there are greys, and also how we should interact. Because I'll be my first to put my hands up and say, in some of my videos, I have got extremely aggressive. I go away, and I do feel terrible later on. Sometimes I do get too aggressive. I feel terrible later on when I come down. So.
Well, I think the medium and finding that right sweet spot is always a question. You know, I listen to, like, The Amazing Atheist, and he's pretty self-aware, and he will be the first one to say that he does sensational things to get viewers to get attention, because without getting the message out there, no one will listen to you. So you have that problem too. I mean, I think we do need to change people's minds, and we do need people to be engaged and to become critical thinkers. And so that's the objective, right?
And there's also, you know, there's sometimes the blur of reasons. For example, when people ask why do I go out and why do I tackle religion with counter apologetics, I always typically go back to the whole beaten wife syndrome. I do talk a lot about how it shares many of the traits, at least the Abrahamic religions, to a domestic abuser. And so they go, oh, that's very emotional. No, that's not why I don't believe in a deity. That's the reason I act on it. It could be, for example, if they were a spiritualist, I wouldn't necessarily get so involved. But the moment that they take that spiritual belief and they, for example, use faith healing on their children, then yes, then I suddenly get quite aggressive about it, because that's messing with someone's life, that's playing with fire. It's okay for a common cold or something like that, take this extract. When it comes to an actual terminal illness, for example, then it becomes a big issue.
Well, there is the thing of the placebo effect, and so there's a certain thing is it's not legal for a doctor to do, but as a doctor you could say, well, I'm not going to interfere with that because that's deeply embedded into the way they're thinking, and that feeling good about themselves is helpful in terms of them getting better. So yeah, I think sometimes you really have to say, well, I know it's not true, but I don't really need to monkey with their faith because it's going to help them feel better and act better.
But then, of course, you're at times when it turns out not to just be slightly beneficial, but actually it can turn out to be negative. For example, I remember there was a type of brain-eating bacteria that was associated with. There's this whole process of cleaning your nasal with tipping, lukewarm water, and it turned out there was a brain-eating bacteria associated with this. So, well, that's a pleasant thought now. Whenever you go swimming, you get a nose plug.
Oh wow! Oh, that's yeah.
It's particularly the oils that are used. It's often found in those. So
Ooh.
It can be a dangerous practice.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's one thing like I said, I like to challenge people's assumptions. And one thing I went out and I did was I looked at the benefits of smoking, for example. And you say, well, there's no benefits to smoking. But actually there are, in terms of cognitive benefits, stress reduction. And I also noticed a pattern of high achievers in a small community. I used to work for AT&T, and all the high achievers were smokers in this little community. I was like, well, isn't that weird? But I think there's an association to it, and it may be beneficial to them.
Yeah. Again, it is a quick way to release stress. I wouldn't suggest it. I'd much suggest people go for a walk or a run or something, because that is just as effective. But a lot of people sometimes don't have, the ability. For example, you're at work, you've got a 5-minute break. You can't go for a 20-minute run around somewhere. You've got 5 minutes. We've got this very structured and cell-like approach to work, where everything has got to be done like a production line. You go from one thing, take a 5-minute break, back to work, sort of thing. I do think there are alternatives, but yes, I can see your point that for some people it is a quick fix.
And so that goes to the whole question of religion, because they'll say you shouldn't do something, or there's a taboo against it. Now there may be some underlying reasons, like you were saying, the head cold with using brain-eating bacteria. You shouldn't do it because of that, not because God told you not to. There's no authority in that. There's actual reason. We can actually walk through it.
Another one that I think is quite good, this comes back to Skeptic, is I don't mind fun fairs. A giggling group of teenage boys or girls going to see the fortune teller, for example. The theatrical gypsy fortune teller.
Right.
But then you have shows that, for example, prey on people who have lost loved ones. And then it becomes, oh, you want to come for a personal reading? Well, that will cost you $500 for an hour-long session. Right. That's when that that takes that step into the damaging. Fortune tellers, I think they're bogus, but they're the least of my concerns compared to the psychics that have their own shows and go on and discuss these sorts of things.
Well, if you were watching the Skeptic community, they had some broadcasts about the fortune tellers that were just stealing a lot of money. We're talking millions of dollars, you know, and they're just these, the fronts for them are just storefronts. They're just storefront psychic healing places. So there is sort of an impact, but we need to take them case by case. And like you say, if the person says, hey, I'm doing this for entertainment and I'm only charging a nominal fee and I'm, you know, that's one thing. But if they're going after the big bucks and it's just a front for a bigger con, then you need to look at it very carefully. You can't just assume that it's one thing without looking at it.
And then they have this lovely way that they like to sue anyone who challenges them. The big, you know, psychics, they like to sue for libel and slander. They're quite large on that.
Oh, I don't follow that too. I remember the psychic network was, who was it? Was the black woman that was running that? I can't remember. Neon, she's a singer. Anyways, it was the Psychic Friends in. They had it in the United States. I think they've taken them off the air. I haven't seen any ads for them for quite some time. But that was pretty pervasive. Yeah, it was pretty scary. You know, like, would people really call these 800 numbers? Do they really call this? And you have a major star promoting how they helped me so much in my personal life. You know, scary.
Talking about major stars, you have things like Scientology as well.
You know, well, isn't Scientology is a major problem because it is promoted by a major star, but it's also very it's just older and older. I guess that's the thing that's so amazing to me about Scientology. It's like, well, our religious teachings are 50 million years old or something. I forget how long ago. It's somehow, the older it is, the more reliable the information is. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's tried and tested sort of mentality, you know. Forget the fact that we learn stuff as we go along. Let's just stick with what they thought before and just go back to using leeches.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some treatments they do use leeches for still. They've actually gone back and looked.
Plastic surgery, I know they use that for.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, there's advantages, and we can learn, but we investigate it. We say, how is this actually working, and how can we use it to our advantage? And that's just good thinking. That's critical thinking. You know, so that's. To simply dismiss something without looking at it is wrong. I mean, we need to look at it. We need to examine the specifics of the situation to actually try to understand it, to figure out the best course of action. And that's why I often feel people aren't actually critical thinking, even in the skeptic community, even in atheism. I just hear this blanket, because you said X, you must be Y. You know, like, no, it can be more subtle than that. You know, and that.
I mean, when I watch videos, I am looking for something to see challenge me. You know, there have been actual things that I've left behind. Like, I no longer use the omnipotence paradox, for example, because someone challenged me on that, and I sort of left that one behind. Instead, now I go for very specific descripting factors inside a certain text of a deity, and then I compare that to society, or even internally within the text. That's what I use. I contradict it that way, rather than trying to use this all-encompassing sort of philosophical argument. So there are ways that I am open to that. And, you know, another thing is, people often ask me, how can I deal with so much? Because there are so many people on YouTube that don't have a clue. We have to be honest. You know, like the creationist front and the anti-vaxxers. People asking, how do I manage to cope with that? And the fact is, well, I'm trying to keep an open mind, first of all. But then the fact is, once I've watched that video and found out that it has absolutely nothing, I do want to explode. And it's by creating the video and ensuring that other people are getting this information that I know I'm doing my part, and that actually calms me down a little bit. Making the videos helps me after watching the video.
I think it is a very productive thing. And when you talk about YouTube in general, it's like, well, why YouTube? Why is it? I think it's a very important medium. I think it's helping everyone become critical thinkers, and that's what I want to see more of. So I engage people, trying to get them to be more critical, you know, of anything. Like my celestial teapot, one of the things that I like to do is pick on the fact that you know, a celestial teapot or a spaghetti monster is far more probable than an invisible, non-tangible. It has no properties. You know,
oh, sorry. Let's keep going. Oh, sorry. I'll come in after.
Okay. But so that's my point is that if you have a tangible object, something you can physically find or look for, you have something infinitely more plausible than something that you have no tangibility to it at all. Even dark matter we know exists because it influences based on gravity, you know, and so dark energy because it's pushing things apart. So, you know, we have tangible things. We're actually looking at something tangible. When you talk about something that's designed to be purposely intangible, purposely impossible to detect, that I have a problem with. I'm saying, hey, if you want to give me some properties I can look for, then maybe we can find this God, you know, but where are the properties?
I mean, I don't know if you know the song "The Spaceman Came Traveling."
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, because it is a carol. It's a Christmas carol, but it takes a sci-fi theme on the whole Jesus story. So it's about an alien who visits the planet. The spaceship hangs above Bethlehem, etc. I was like, whilst people are laughing about this and making jokes about it, that is far more probable than an angel's, angelic choir singing to the shepherds and a God coming down, impregnating Mary, etc. That's far more probable. It's not likely, but it's far more probable.
And there's things we can investigate to determine whether they actually may have happened. There's evidence, maybe there's non-DNA strand life form. Hey, this is alien life, you know, we have here. You know, there are ways of investigating. And the other one is the simulated reality example. Is I often say, well, you could have someone that ran a program, and technically they're God because they ran this program and created life, right? But that person would then have properties that we could actually talk about. Yeah. We'd say, well, that person probably has a limited consciousness. That person has limited memory. But, you know, we can start talking about them. Well, what if they're as smart as we are, but they just got lucky and they ended up running into this program to create the universe? So would that person be God? Would that be someone you would want to worship? So there's an accidental God, if you will.
And there's also there's this idea of even when science reaches areas that are very difficult to study, for example, the quantum areas or multiverse, you know, they don't say, oh, it's mystical, we can't study it any further. They are trying. They're doing their hardest. You know, with the multiverse theory, there's the LISA Pathfinder satellite going up, and they're looking for specific levels of signatures that they say like sort of represent umbilical cords from the possible universes that we have come from, or even possibly universes that then, after we were formed, we have formed ourselves.
Right.
They are trying to look for this. They've developed ways that they are trying to, you know, detect anything that could possibly hint at this. It is going like back to dark matter, even though it is so hard to detect. You can see its force on gravity, for example, its effects on gravity. So, you know, they don't say it's mystical, so let's just give up and go home. They say this is hard. We need to keep going at this. And we need to develop new technology, new devices. For example, the Hadron Collider with the Higgs boson. You know, it was theoretical for a long time, and then they developed machinery that they thought, okay, this might be able to actually detect it. Well, we find some signatures. Is this the signatures that we would expect if it was the Higgs boson, for example? So you can see that science has this. It wants to keep pushing, whereas religion tells you, oh, you're asking too many questions now. You're just getting too far into things. Just stop thinking here, and let's just go back to, you know, who you should marry and who you shouldn't marry.
Well, and that's exactly the point, right? I mean, it's you have the difference between future looking and past looking. So I even when people use historical evidence, sometimes they say, well, that's all well and good, but how is it going to affect our future? I mean, we can control what happens in the future. We really can't control what happens in the past, as far as I know. I mean, have you invented a time machine that I'm not aware of?
I'm trying to think where to take it now. Damn, I'm stuck.
No, I was just, well, yeah, I know, I free train of thought. I go in wild directions, but really when you look at biblical scripture in terms of people using this as evidence for what somebody wrote, yes. You know, someone wrote that. Who wrote it? Why they wrote it is an open question. I mean, it's interesting. Some of it is there, and I actually am very you know, I'll find certain passages, I'll find that's really interesting. One of my favorite passages is the burning bush, and that whole story, if you think about that from a philosophical standpoint, that is a really interesting story. What were they thinking when they wrote that?
Mm-hmm. It displays our species' creativity to a superior extent. I mean, you know, creativity is what's allowed our species to thrive. Now, I'd argue that some aspects of our creativity have gone a bit too far. You know, it's almost like religion is, if you've seen those memes of like animals crossed over into hybrids, it says, science, have we gone too far? It's sort of like that, you know, fiction, have we gone too far? With,
well, it is. I mean, even we need to be critical of, one of the things that is frustrating for me is the whole thing of genetic and engineered plants. Now, I think we should genetically engineer plants, but I also feel the communication that companies that do engineer plants haven't been real forthcoming, and so they've created a stigma. So we can't do it in a safe way.
the shady corporation.
Well, and you know, I'm willing to listen to both sides of the issue, but I think there needs to be a conversation, and it needs to be a rational conversation. But when you bring in religion, when you bring in you're violating nature, you're doing this, we're always violating nature. That's what we do.
It's not just the religious right in this one. This one is also the over. You know, I'd say the left does play a part in this. This is one. I am left. I'm leaning left, but this is one area. Like when I remember I was in school and we were watching videos on GMO, both sides given equal time, sort of thing, and we just see the protesters not protesting. They're going out and they're destroying not normal fields of GMO, but test fields. Fields designed to see if they are damaging. Yeah, that's the sign of an ideology that doesn't want to be challenged, that doesn't want to be tested. That's just a sign of a group of people who, regardless of what the results and the data shows, they're not going to care. That made me extremely mad, especially when you think about the vitamin deficiencies in various different cultures. The creation of the golden rice, etc. And they're not even allowing scientists to do the tests because they'll destroy the crops there, which then prevents, an objective basis on calling whether it's safe or not. There have been issues with GMO food. For example, when they were trying to cross, I think it was soya with a nut. What I remember. But it kept the nut allergy. Whatever they were trying to cross kept the nut allergy, so they decided to scrap that idea. They didn't make it food though, because they are the most tested foods. But then there's also a case of in the previous century there was a hybridized type of potato, and potatoes all contain a certain toxin. I've forgotten which toxin it is, but this potato, even though it was hybridized, it wasn't GMO. It contained a very large quantity of it. And they had to withdraw it after a certain amount of people got ill, etc. Both ways can go wrong. There's no security system. Nature isn't there to keep us safe.
And that's the best way to say that. It's like nature wasn't designed for us per se. I mean, we simply survived it. That doesn't mean that it had any intention to keep us alive, or it's magically trying to make us more intelligent, which is just, it's naive to look at evolution that way, because that's not what evolution is telling us. It's telling us it's the way we came into being, not.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and it's important that we realize where we stand within within the universe, if you will, and that's sort of my problem with irrational thinking. And I do blame a lot of irrational thinking on religious type of thinking. That things don't go question because, don't question that would be bad, and it's like, no, everything needs to be questioned. Even I know I have mistakes, I know you make mistakes, we all are going to make mistakes, and it's how we learn. We learn from our mistakes, and so you have to go out there and make a few mistakes, get beaten down, get trained, and then we learn. That's
rock the boat.
What's that?
Rock the boat.
Yeah, well, yeah, in a sense. I'm just wishing more people didn't feel like they had to be right. I think it's like even in education, they're showing that You know, we teach people, oh, like you're intelligent versus, oh, you worked hard, or, well, it's okay to be wrong. You know, like making mistakes, oh, you can't make a mistake. And grading people, we had one professor in college, they graded on a curve. And he says, because I want to know the extent of the knowledge that people have. You know, and it's just like, oh, I don't like that idea. So the average grade, he tried to make it 50%, just like you would have on a bell curve, right? So that idea of mistakes are going to be made, and I want to know which mistakes you're making, and basically there's more information in grading on a bell and giving the like C to the middle and A's to the ones out in the lower percentile, because you actually have more information, if that makes sense. Because if you try to compress all the information into a spike, it's hard to see, differentiate levels of intelligence or level of knowledge. That's just a way to look at it.
I've lost my thought now. I keep doing this. I'm awful. I'm sorry. I have like a really good idea, and then it goes. It's just yeah. Oh, I have to think of all that. Yeah, it's just. It's going back to the whole principle of teaching people how to think as opposed to what to think. You know, more critical analysis rather than this is the answer to 2A, this is the answer to 2B. You know, it comes down to just how standardized you make everything.
Well, I'm in school, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that standard thinking going on. Well, we want people to be able to pass this test. You know, in the United States, we're going through a standardized testing so that we can know if kids are learning. And on one hand, we need feedback, we need testing, we need to know whether we're being successful. But we also need to be very careful about teaching to a test, because then that's going to hamper creativity in both the teaching instruction and in students. You know, we just got to get the right answers on these tests. What's the answer to the test? That's all I care about.
It's also, you know, different ways of learning. And they are trying to diverge now into, you know, trying to figure out how different ways students learn. For example, in my school there was auditory, textual, and visual learning. Those were the 3 types of learning. But then they even tried to standardize that, for example. So you will take a test at the beginning, and it tells you the way you should learn. And it's like, that's kind of ironic. It's trying to tell you to be different, but then they've taken that concept and they've standardized that. So, you know.
Well, one of the interesting things about education, I did some educational psychology in college, and one of the things was exactly that, is where you can't standardize a standard, but we have this thing called the MMPI. Not an MMP, excuse me. It's individual learning plan. And the funny thing about that plan is a very good idea. Why isn't that standardized around? So each person has an individual learning plan, and that plan can change over time, and you just sort of put goals into those plans. What are the self goals? What are the, you know, parental goals? You know, what, you know, and so there's a communication going back and forth, not a cookie cutter, boom, you need to fit that mold, dude.
Then it's also, you know, talking about ways to differently you learn differently for different topics as well.
Right.
For example, even if they're very similar, because one, I remember, psychology, I much prefer to work in a very small group of 3 people, compared to sociology, in which case I liked yelling across the classroom. You know, I liked talking to people as 30 or so people. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I was just muting so you wouldn't hear the coffee drinking.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So, you know, even in similar topics, you can find a wide range of differences in the ways that you do process things. I don't know why I like sociology in learning in bigger groups than I did psychology, but that's just something I found, and luckily our tutors for both psychology and sociology were absolutely wonderful, and they did ask everyone, you know, okay, well, how do you want to learn today? Oh, okay, you want to do small groups, or do you want to keep discussing? Okay, then we'll do that, because that's college. Sadly, in schools, that doesn't exist so much. It's very pre-planned, everything. it's kind of a shame, but I guess it's also funding, etc.
Well, it is interesting to hear that perspective in your colleges, because that's kind of unusual. In the United States, we have a lot of community colleges are more teaching colleges, and you'll get that kind of behavior. Universities tend to be more what do we call it? Research colleges. So, and we need both. We need teaching colleges, and we need, research colleges.
Of course, there's a bit of a difference here, because the college in our system would be closer to what your high school is like. Because we do school, then we do college, and then we go to university. University is the last one. We used to have technology universities, more academic universities. Academic being Oxford, Cambridge, and then the techies were, the engineer universities, etc. But yeah, I mean, at university it's then changed again, because now the way they structure it over here, we have our lectures, which we go to, we listen to, we make notes, and then we also have tutorials, which we go to, and that's taken typically by a student who's doing their masters, so he's taking their own course further on, and they will be teaching, and that's when the group discussion happens. You all come together, you all talk in smaller groups. There's for one lecture you'll have 4 or so tutorials. It'll be 4 master students who will then take on groups and start teaching that way. So I think it gives you your freedom, but it also is there to help you in a way. So it is a nice thing, and again, university, you have a lot more freedom. It is far more up to you to get a lot more of your reading done, to study more. So of course, you can work however you need to, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I'm pretty critical of education, because I think it should be more dynamic, more integrated. There's too much separation of things, when things should be more. Many topics can be covered within a single group. Like if it's separating technology from academic, that's like a no. Yeah, that doesn't seem like a good idea. I mean, like MIT is a good example of where that doesn't happen. You have both disciplines kind of crammed together. You have to kind of deal with both types of people.
We've carried the subject a long way from where we started. Just looking back, we're leaving a trail of destruction and thought, hopefully. If whoever's watching this, hopefully we're leaving a trail of thought.
Well, a lot of yeah, no, I know, but I guess that's true though, in terms of when you talk about why is it important that we think critically. I mean, everything is a matter of thinking critically about. I mean, there are no off topics, right? And that's kind of my point in terms of, like, so well, you're picking on religion. Well, religion is the best example of where we're absolutely hands off on.
It's institutionalized, yeah.
And in the United States, it feeds into political philosophy so that people can't say things. I mean, we don't know how many atheists there are in Congress, because they know it's the third rail of politics. You can't talk about it. So how can you have an honest politician that can't talk honestly about their beliefs if they know if they tell you how they believe, they're out of politics? So they can't do what they love doing, because we are irrational when it comes to someone's belief. They have to believe in a God. That is absolutely retarded.
And there's also the battle cries of blasphemy and Islamophobia. There are some general cases where racism is apparent, but then for the moment that you criticize something, so suddenly it is Islamophobia, or you're Islamophobic because you don't acknowledge that this is okay. No, I have my own opinion. So that's another one that they use very much.
Well, Islamophobia is something that I went into on Sam Harris, because in some ways I think a part of it is to embrace embrace the phobia, and that was sort of my take on it. Was if criticizing Islam for the danger that it poses to society in general and the world, if that's bad, then I am an Islamophobe. I mean, that's just, I'm okay with I'm okay if you need to call me that.
Yeah, a phobia is an irrational fear, hatred, or disgust. So when people ask me, "Oh, you're Islamophobic," I go, no, I know what the Quran says about gay people and LGBT people. It says that if a man makes, an advance on another man, they pretend that it's like having sex in broad daylight in the middle of a park somewhere. That's what has to happen. But no, it says an advance on another man is the offence that will get you stoned to death. I know what that says. Now, it doesn't seem irrational to be slightly scared of a group that says I should be put to death, along with, we have a gay night at my university, it's called Tease. Everyone in there should be put to death, because they're always making advances on one another. That does not seem irrational. Okay, it makes it very difficult, because of course, so many believers just ignore this. They just have this sort of way they switch themselves off, they compartmentalize it all, and they just carry on doing their lives like, oh, well, that's just a fundamentalist. They're called fundamentalists because they follow the fundamental tenets of their religion.
Right.
That's where the word comes from.
Right. No, and I totally agree with you. And to me, it's a matter of finesse, meaning, do you how you react to being called an Islamophobe is critical to getting the conversation back to the core problem of Islam. Don't worry about being called an Islamophobe. I guess is that what I mean? Go through that. Okay, so I'm an Islamophobe. So what? Are you labeling me because you think I'm irrational? I mean, because I don't think I am. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but it's not an irrational fear of Islam. It's a rational fear, and this is specifically what I fear. I fear being stoned to death. Is being the fear of being stoned to death an irrational fear? And I would say, no, it's not an irrational fear. So your label might be wrong, but I'm not so worried about the label. And it's totally nuanced in that sense. Is that the best way to go about it? To not worry about the labels? I mean, when we resist something, it creates a conflict. But if we kind of go through that conflict, you can hopefully get to a conversation. So it's kind of like, forget that label, let's move on to the core of the subject. Are you saying that Islam won't stone, gay?
So I was in Norway, of course, last month, and they had the anti-ISIS protest over there, by all the Islamic communities in Norway coming together protesting ISIS. And it's like, there was also a female speaker, and it's like, brilliant. Yes, I celebrate the fact that she in Norway feels like she could be a female Islamic individual and speak. However, I know what's written in your text. I know how inconsistent that is with the text that you claim to be, all-encompassing, the word of a divine being, which is beyond question. It is so hard to go in there, because at one point I want to celebrate that she can do that, but at the other point I just want to go to her and tell her, but your Quran tells you can't do this. It's in many ways it can feel like kicking a puppy as well. You want to celebrate it, and it's brilliant that she's doing it, but her worldview, the fact that her actual actions are inconsistent with what she claims as her beliefs.
And and that gets into strategy versus reality. What is the best strategy to take with her, knowing that she believes that this has to be good? I mean, it's kind of like, I know this is good because I'm told that it's good. I mean, that's the Quran. And so they come with the attitude, if this is good and that is good, they both must be good. They don't see the contradiction because they don't want to see the contradiction. So do you point the contradiction out to her? Is that going to help the situation, or is that going to hurt the situation? And that's, you never know. That's the problem.
Yeah, there's also the whole idea of comfort, for example. The elderly grandmother who's always been, the village green church goer sort of thing, pickled cucumber sandwiches out in front of the church on a Sunday, that sort of thing. Do you go and do you tell them that there's no God? No, of course not. The people we should be looking to discuss with, and deal with fundamentally are the ones who are creating policies and the next generation. You know, you start building the future by working with the next generation. However, you can't do it the same way that the apologists talk about the 4 to 14 gap. You know, you don't want to indoctrinate them. I don't tell people they must believe the same way I do. All I want to do is get people to question what they currently believe, and then hopefully they'll start doing the rest for me, sort of thing.
And that brings up a great point, because I think in your own life, this is something that I do, is what do I fundamentally believe that has changed? You know, what have I done to change myself, you know, in terms of a belief that I have? And I think that's why I look for sort of the outlier ideas, to think, well, okay, I think that's wrong. And that was kind of the reason that originally I had said to you, let's talk about brain uploading and, you know, cryonics and these things, because it challenges your belief about reality. You know, say, okay, let's challenge the belief of everyone about reality. What do we think is possible, and why?
Yeah, actually, I actually saw another thing on that. It's talking about going beyond sort of, doing that. It's creating more digital arbiters as well. I watched some things on doing that. Yeah, so with the brain upload, creating like a physical representation as well.
Right.
It's all. I can understand. Okay, I'm getting muddled up now. I can understand that, yes, it would be a brilliant thing, but at the same time, it's also a scary thing.
It is.
You talk to people who know their Star Trek. I was never a Trekkie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to admit this, probably someone's going to scream in the audience. I was never a Trekkie. But then you hear how they talk about the way that the transport system, you know, beam me up Scotty, works in Star Trek.
Yeah.
It destroys the person, and then creates another duplicate somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's actually pretty scary, because with me, would it really be feeling like me, or would I...
There were subtle jokes in the series about that, especially in the Star Trek The Next Generation. There was one transporter tech that hated the technology because I know how it works. Whereas the rest of them didn't know how it works, so they didn't worry about it. But he knew how it worked, and was like, I'm petrified of this, having my molecule pull apart and then put back together, and that's like, it scared me. But... And then in the one series, they have Scotty stuck in the pattern buffer of a transporter, and then they re-emerge him, right? And I was like, yeah, okay. But they're telling you how the technology works, and then the ramifications, and this is where I criticize Star Trek, the ramifications of that technology would mean that people wouldn't die. They still have death. They want death. They're obsessed with death. You have to die. There has to be a point at which you're dead. Right, and yet they showed that if you throw someone in the pattern buffer, you can bring them back. Right, so okay, wouldn't more people be doing that? Hey man, just throw me in the pattern buffer and wait until you have a cure for this, right? So there was a disconnect with reality, the reality they had created. So, and you know, that's a small point, but they made fun of that fact though too by doing these things from time to time.
Of course, with 3D printing, you never know.
Exactly. Just print a new one. But it's there for me. It's there to challenge. Lawrence Krauss. I don't. Are you familiar with him?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But he did this. The science of superheroes, as an example of asking questions. If you have X, what would the consequences be? Like, in terms of force, for Superman to have the power that he does, he would have to weigh X. No matter how strong he is, he would have to have a certain fundamental weight, you know, to be able to pull these off. And so you create the reality, right? You create the rules for that reality. Okay, but then you violate those rules? You're not allowed to do that. But no, I mean, that's just being, that's picking on the, you know, they're dispelling their own reality in that sense. Mm-hmm. So, and your mind's not going there, right?
I just blank out sometimes. It's just, I think it's part of what makes my mind work in the way it does.
Yeah.
It can also be the issue because I just talk to people and I just blank suddenly. It's like, next thing.
Yeah. Well, I was just looking at it from the religious standpoint. You know, it's like I noticed you often will go to that point at which you're saying, okay, if this is your reality, you're creating an inconsistent reality. You're not playing by your rules. It's like you're saying that is the word of God, yet you're saying things that are contradictory to what I know happens to be in that book. And it's very frustrating to people, you know, that believe in the Bible. It's like you can point to the Bible and say, well, what about that? What about that? What about that? You know, it's like, dude, I mean, be consistent. I mean, if you believe it, fine, but be consistent with what you believe.
Yeah, it's like I'm currently doing a video response actually to an atheist this time, and it's on abortion. And you know, she goes on about how even in rape situations, she is against abortion. And so she said, I'm arguing for human rights. It's like, I gave a scenario, I kind of came off Matt Dillahunty, who's talked about before, you know, having other people who are terminally ill plugged into you without your consent. Would they have that right, sort of thing? You know, I gave a scenario like oligarch, it's like pointing out the facts. Even in that scenario, you'd probably say they wouldn't have the right. But that's a person with an identity, fully conscious, developed nervous system, etc. And you're not just giving the fetus human rights, so the same rights as that person you would give, but you are giving them rights beyond that person. You know. So,
well, abortion is an interesting one, and I tend to, and I have looked at it, tried to look at it from, well, how do I? The problem with that is if you want to give people rights, right? One of the things people have a hard time doing is saying, well, one person has more rights than another, right? And you can look at it economically. You can say, okay.
I'd say the key word is person there. You require personhood, and personhood you require identity.
I think you're pushing personhood. Let me go with it, and then you can criticize me. But my concept was this: if the value of a person, okay, in this case, you're overvaluing would be what I'd say the fetus, and you're undervaluing the mother. Okay, so if you look at it strictly from an economic sense, you're devaluing the mom for the price of the fetus. We've already invested a lot of money and time into the mother, you know, and if this is not the best use of her time having a baby, then, and she's the best judge of that, what the use of her time is. And if she says, hey, I want to have this baby, I think it's the best use of my time, go for it. But if she says, no, I don't think it's the best use of my time, then we've created a person. She is a person that can make a rational decision if she's making a rational decision. And I think you just base it on that. And the rest of the stuff you just say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but reality is imperfect. You know, some people, yeah.
Lactigate. I love
personhood. You are going with personhood.
You know, it's for human rights, you have to have this aspect of personhood, this aspect of identity. You know, and before you have your brain just start developing very early, but it's only really the motor functions of the brain. So your heartbeat, your breathing, you know, not the breathing so much, not the lungs, but you know, the heartbeat, etc. The very basic fundamentals. That's your motor functions that do develop very early. But before the start of the third trimester, you don't have the, you know, rest of your brain isn't really there. You don't have the ability for conscious thought or identity or anything like that. So it is not really that lack of identity. We're not on about slightly damaged cognitive state, like person with a slight mental malformation. We're on about completely lacking. It is literally just a physical entity. Then you have to discuss, well, does that really have the rights of a fully cognitive and conscious human being? Then, of course, the only critique I can really see that is people who are being totally brain dead for such a long period of time that their brain is completely destroyed, except for their motor functions, etc. I can see that critique, you know. Then do they have the human rights, etc.? So that is one that I know I'm probably going to get critiqued on when I do release this video, is the person who has had their brain completely destroyed. So it is a very complicated area, and very often it feels like walking through a social political minefield almost. Just trying to find out the right way to go.
Well, I think you need to be open too. That I think is one thing I hear you're saying is, this is the right way. You're like, well, I can see some problems with that particular argument. I can see ways of going, and I agree with you. It's not like I think these arguments are going to be perfect, but one of the things that, like, for abortion and why I think abortion rights are important is, what are the benefits to society? So we show societies that don't allow abortions, and then we look at societies that do allow abortions. Is a fact that they allow abortions, is that contributing to a healthier society? And the argument that you are a slave to bringing a fetus into this world. I mean, do we need you to be a slave to the fetus growing process? And that's partly why I say, no, I think it's a bad precedent set, because, again, I would say you're devaluing the mother and the value that person has to and in a sense it devalues society at the same time.
And another example I gave, because I talked about, a person is a collective of both the physical and the cognitive, which is the result of the physical, but it's advanced processes going on. I explained that they're collective. It's not just person, biological sort of thing. Because we do have to understand that cognitive functions are at work, and it is a bit more complicated. And then we enter a chaos theory with the butterfly effect and all that. But I was pointing out the fact that, say, I cut off my arm, and then I gave it the devices to survive completely on its own, but I didn't give it devices to have cognitive ability. Would it then become my genetic twin with its own set of human rights, or would it just be my arm? That sort of thing, because then you look at a fetus which lacks that cognitive ability as well, is tissue and all that, and then you enter that discussion. So it was just a bit of a thought that I came up with that. I'm telling anyone who's watching what's coming up in the next video, so you don't have to watch the 20-minute video.
Well, I think it's great that you're playing with different ideas and looking at, well, we could use this example, and there are a lot of different examples you can use. So I'm always interested in what people think are important in terms of pro-life, quote unquote. It is that, and it's important that we do listen to what they have and what the concerns are, and where it's emotional. It's a very emotional argument, and I think the idea of, we need to value life, and I'm all about the values of life, but and how to decide what is the best course of action for the individual and society as a whole in terms of establishing policy. Yeah, so I think we should do that. But we're like an hour. I said it was going to be about half an hour. I was thinking, well, we probably shouldn't make it forever in a day, and we can always digest another time. But I think we've been successful, don't you?
Yes, I think we have, and I've certainly enjoyed it. And you've got several hours stored away that you can still use, because it's not a case of you have to use them all at once, or if you don't use it each month, then you don't get it. You just contact me anytime, tell me if you want another date, a different topic, or anything like that. We can go into something in depth, and yes, I'm quite happy to. Now that you remember the links up there, we should be good.
I had to figure out I still have the problem with the audio, and I'm not sure what that's about. And I was just saying, well, I'll see if I can get through it this time, not get too panicked when it doesn't work. And I did manage to get it to work, but I don't exactly know how. So there are still some question marks. It may not be a smooth transition again either, but we'll see how it works.
Quite simple. Scott did it and leave it at that.
All right, sounds like a plan. Well, this has been a great conversation, and I appreciate the time, and we'll do it again. And I hope we'll get some good comments out of it, too. All right.
Okay. Take care.
You take care. Bye-bye.